In Inspector Calls, Priestley presents the younger generation as the only real possibility for moral progress. But crucially, not because they're innocent or morally superior, characters like Eric are deeply flawed. What distinguishes the younger generation is their capacity for self-reflection and change. From the outset, Priestley establishes a clear generational divide. Burling's sneering reference to the famous younger generation who know it all immediately reveals his contempt for youth. The adjective famous drips with sarcasm and reduces younger people to a stereotype of arrogance and idealism. Although the play is set in 1912, this tension feels timeless. Priestley taps into a universal conflict, older generations often dismissing younger voices in order to preserve their own authority. Burling's certainty is central to this. Admitting his faults would destabilize the capitalist worldview that his identity is built around. However, Priestley gradually undermines that certainty throughout the play, and ironically, the supposedly immature younger generation become the characters most capable of moral change. Yet this is complicated through Eric. He is perhaps the most morally ambiguous character in the play. His confession that he was in that state where a chap easily turns nasty is deeply unsettling. Instead of saying, I turned nasty, Eric shifts to the third person, a chap. That grammatical shift matters because it distances himself from the responsibility as though he can't fully confront these actions. At the same time, the phrase also abstracts his behaviour into something disturbingly ordinary, almost suggesting that male aggression is expected or inevitable. Priestley exposes not only Eric's guilt, but the wider social attitudes that allow men to minimise harmful behaviour. And Priestley doesn't make Eric easy to forgive. He exploited Eva, stole money, and there are troubling implications of coercion in his relationship. However, Sheila's guilt feels more immediate and direct. Her response of, so I'm really responsible, is immediate. She says, I'm, demonstrating her acceptance of blame. Sheila moves towards responsibility, whereas Eric initially retreats from it. Yet Eric's instability also makes him feel psychologically real. Priestley suggests that moral growth is rarely neat or immediate. It's uncomfortable and conflicted. This connects to the inspector's observation that they're more impressionable, and at first these words sound patronising, but Priestley uses it and reframes it as a strength. The younger generation's openness becomes hopeful because they're still capable of change. In contrast, the older generation are emotionally rigid and static. Once the inspector's authority is questioned, Burling and Mrs. Burling immediately focus on technicalities rather than morality. However, Sheila and Eric recognise the deeper truth. Eva Smith's suffering was real, regardless of whether the inspector or indeed she was. Ultimately, Priestley presents the younger generation not as morally perfect, but as morally responsible. This is why Eric remains such an important character. He embodies contradiction, compassionate yet exploitive, ashamed yet evasive, vulnerable yet destructive. Priestley refuses to simplify him because real social change depends not on perfect people, but on flawed people who are still capable of recognizing their own failures.